Welcome back to another episode of the CSK8 podcast. My name is Jared O'Leary. So every other week, I like to do unpacking scholarship episodes where I unpack latest CS research, discourse, and kind of talk about what it means in the classroom. This week is going to be different. It's going to be a very short episode. Instead of doing that, I would much rather listeners of this podcast take the time you would have spent listening to this episode and go read up about anti-racism. Now, as a disclaimer, this is not an agenda for a specific political party or anything like that. I'm a registered independent. I voted for more than 3 parties over the past several years. This is also not an attack against police officers. I strongly support Black Lives Matter, and I also have both parents who have worked in a police department. My mom was a dispatcher. My dad was a police officer. He was a narcotics officer, motorcycle, head of the SWAT team, commander, etc. I know what it's like to fear for a family member's life and their safety when my dad has been called out, like during dinner time or whatever, to go on a call that puts his life at risk. However, what I don't know is what that feels like for myself as an individual and every family member I know every day. That constant fear is an unknown to me. And it honestly speaks towards my privilege as a white individual. In the show notes for this episode, which you can find in whatever app you're listening to this on or by visiting jaredoleary.com, there are many links to resources about anti-racism. Almost every one of these links that are included in the show notes are a compilation of dozens upon dozens of resources that you can use to learn more about anti-racism. For example, the blog post by Mark Guzdial, Becoming Anti-Racist, Learning About Race in CS Education, is something that would be very pertinent to CS educators. However, all of the other resources in these show notes are worth spending some time learning from, sharing, and discussing respectfully with others. If you're listening to this and you feel that you don't have bias, you don't have racism, or that you don't want to get political, honestly, all I can respectfully say is please take the time to go through these resources, speak with others, learn. And to clarify who I'm speaking to right now, I'm speaking to all the listeners who do not experience systemic and individualized racism. If you are in that category of people, like myself, then what I'm asking for is to do this right. Learn more, amplify voices of people who have been oppressed for hundreds of years and continue to be oppressed. And if you are somebody who is experiencing racism or has experienced racism, please let me know how I can use my privileges and powers to help you. My hope is that the resources in these show notes can assist with this, can help with the dialogue, can help with the change to have some kind of a lasting impact. And if you don't want to go with those resources, just search for anti-racism, engage in discussions with other people, amplify voices, and own up to privileges. Thank you for taking the time to learn, grow, discuss, and share. I know this topic is uncomfortable, but it's one that we need to discuss. It is a topic I have been trying to get guests on to discuss since last year, 2019, when the podcast first started. However, I have not been able to find a guest who has been willing to join me for this discussion yet. If you have any recommendations for any guests that could come on and have a discussion on anti-racism in education or culturally responsive pedagogy, doesn't even have to be in CS education, I would love to have them on as a guest. If you could introduce me to them, that would be amazing. There's a contact me button on my website, or you can just send them this episode, however you want to go about doing that. Please help me improve this podcast. This episode is now going to conclude with 8 minutes and 46 seconds of silence. If you do not know what the significance of that timestamp is, please search for it online. Thank you for listening.